Hello and welcome to another virtual author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles, and today the Poison Pen's special guest authors are two of our favorites, Kate Carlisle and Vicki Delany. Kate's new book is The Paper Caper, and Vicki's latest is Murder Spills the Tea. Before we begin our chat, I'd like to let those tuning in know that the Poison Pen does have copies of both Vicki's and Kate's books while supplies last. So if you'd like one or more, please give us a call or go online to the bookstore and we would be happy to hold one for you to pick up or put one in the mail. And now I'd like to welcome Vicki and Kate.
Hello, John. Always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, ladies.
Yes.
I always like to start these virtual events because I'm fascinated by how an author got to the place where they're at. I kind of want to know their backstory, as they say in the biz. So let's start with you, Kate. Can you tell us a little bit about who you were before you became a writer?
Gosh. Well, I spent a lot of years in television production, but the last few years, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get my sound up here. The last couple years, I became a legal secretary because I used to have a habit of, we'd have hiatuses on shows that I was working on, and I would go on vacation, spend all my money, and come back and go back to work. And the last time I did that, the show was canceled. So, and that happened all the time as well, but this was a long-running show. But so my girlfriend got me a job in her law firm, and I spent a few years as a legal secretary, which was motivation to keep writing. And eventually that came true.
What about you, Vicki?
Well, my background almost completely opposite to Kate. I was a computer programmer and then a systems analyst. And I go so far back in the computers that I was a computer programmer in the days of COBOL and punch cards. We didn't even have a computer on our desk. We, wrote it all on paper and sent it away overnight to get punched.
Yips. I think Vicki's frozen.
Programmer for a long time.
There we go.
And I became a systems analyst at a bank. But the thing is, the computer business was changing so fast, and I just, I wasn't that old, but I didn't want to keep up anymore when things started changing really, really quickly. So I was sort of thinking, I'd like to sort of look into doing something else. And as it happened, the company that I worked for, the Royal Bank of Canada, at that time they would, I don't know if they do now, but at that time they would pay for any kind of adult education that the staff wanted to take. Didn't have to relate to their job at all. So I took a couple of creative writing courses at a local community college and liked it so much that I decided, well, if I wanted to keep doing the course, I had to start a book. So I did start a book.
Yeah. Was that your first book that got published, Vicki?
It was kind of not really published. It was kind of a very, very, called Whiteout, a very, very early attempt at a small independent publisher. So we kind of shoved that under the carpet. My first real book that got published by a proper publisher was Scare the Light Away, which was published by good old Poison Pen Press.
Yeah. What about you, Kate? What was your first book's path to publication like?
Well, I was submitting ideas for a long time. I kept submitting ideas of mysteries with 5 lawyers and
a legal secretary.
Right, and somebody dies and the legal secretary solves it, everything. No. I kept getting rejection saying there's no niche, there's no it's written like a cozy, and I didn't know what that was at the time, but we need a
hook for it.
A hook.
Yeah.
And finally, after about 4 or 5 of those, along with other rejections of other book, I was so determined to figure out what a hook was that I did a little research and took some classes, and I figured out what a hook was. And I said to myself, I will show you a hook. And I came up with the bookbinder ideas. And I Googled bookbinder, mysteries, and there were no bookbinder mysteries. So I wrote it in about 3 weeks. I submitted it, and it sold pretty quickly. So it took me about 10 years to do that.
I know. Sounds like goes fast.
Yeah.
So that was the start to your bibliophile series.
Yes, that was Homicide in hardcover, the first.
And today you're here with the latest, which is the Paper Caper.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell us about that book for those who are not familiar?
Well, this one is number 16, Sweet 16. And in this book, I always start with a book within the book when I'm starting to plot. But with this book, I started with Mark Twain because he's my husband's favorite author, and I thought I'd have a lot to choose from. But as it turns out, I chose one of his books, which was The Prince and the Pauper. And I had done some research on Mark Twain. He was a newspaper man along with 100 other occupations during his life, but the newspaper man kind of jumped out at me because my brother was a newspaper man, and I thought I would make this guy the number one new character, Joseph, a newspaper man. So he runs a newspaper in San Francisco. He's also fabulously wealthy, and he's a good friend of Brooklyn's husband, Derek, who rescued him years ago in a kidnap attempt. So they're good friends, and he has decided to have the first annual Mark Twain Festival at the Covington Library, which Brooklyn's always working there. Brooklyn loves Joseph because he's a book lover, and so it's the first night of the festival, and we're meeting all the characters along with his beautiful new wife, Joseph's beautiful new wife, and her mother, who has moved in with Joseph. So the story is based around the festival, and there's lots of events around San Francisco. There's the jumping frog event at the park, Golden Gate Park, and there's a riverboat event with gambling on a big riverboat that's parked at the Embarcadero. And so it's a lot of San Francisco, and it's a lot of fun events connected to Mark Twain. And there's a murder or two along the way, and we think that Joseph might be in danger, and he is, and somebody dies, and goes on and on. That's the basics.
Well, I think you put an interesting play to Twain's Prince and the Pauper in the book, because they're not sure if the murder victim, was killed because of himself or because he won the contest where he got to be the newspaper mogul for the day.
Right. The contest is interesting because Joseph is a familiar figure around San Francisco, and so the Prince and the Pauper contest is they're trying to find someone who looks like Joseph, which is odd, but it's San Francisco. And he's going to pay him a lot of money, and the newspaper is supporting it, and so we don't know who that guy's going to be. And when he's revealed, his life is suddenly in danger, and everybody's in danger.
As they should be in a good book.
That's right.
Vicki, you're here with the latest in your Seaside Murder tea shop series, Murder Spills the Tea. What can you tell us about that?
Okay, this is I just happen to have one here.
Very good.
This is the third in the Tea by the Sea Mysteries, published by Kensington. And it is, as you can see, all about afternoon tea. So the premise is that the main character, Lily Roberts, is a trained pastry chef, and she's come to the town of North Augusta on Cape Cod, which is not a real town, but it's near North Truro, to open a tea room in the property of her grandmother's B&B. So her grandmother has taken an old Victorian era house and converted it into her life's dream, which was to have a big house on the sea. And the grandmother can't afford the house, so she needs to open a B&B, and she runs it as a B&B, and she manages to get Lily to come and run her tea room so on the property. So the premise is all about afternoon tea, and I'm a big fan of afternoon tea, and one of my daughters in particular is a big fan of afternoon tea, and it's kind of a thing that we do for some, for a really big treat, go for a proper afternoon tea. So when I was sort of looking for a sort of a hook, as Kate called it, for a new book, I thought about the whole tea concept. So anyway, so it's set in Tea by the Sea, which is the name of the tea room. There's recipes in the book. There's lots of talk about what she's serving, both in terms of tea and in terms of the food, much of which I have baked myself. In this book, Lily Roberts is the protagonist, and unknown to her, her grandmother, Rose Campbell, and her best friend, Bernie Murphy, have entered her in a reality TV show called America Bakes. So she's not very happy about that. She's not one for the limelight. She just wants to be in the...
Oh dear.
...into doing it, so she agrees, reluctantly. So the book opens first day of filming, and quite obviously, right from the very beginning, this is not a happy set. The judges bicker with each other. The judges bicker with the director, with the assistant director. They're alternately rude or cloyingly friendly, and sometimes they're a little handsy with the guests. The guests who are, supposedly there to eat food and give commentary and that sort of thing. And one of the judges is particularly obnoxious. The Yorkshireman, who has a reputation of being, he's kind of the Gordon Ramsay character, right? He's got a reputation of being pretty hard. And he's extremely rude to one of Lily's waitresses. Lily orders them all off property, never to return. Well, of course, she has a contract, so they return, and someone dies. in her tea room. So the tea room is shut down, and of course she can't afford to have the tea room shut down in the middle of the summer. So she has to investigate herself to try and clear her waitress, the waitress that was insulted, of the suspicion of the crime. And it goes from there.
Are you a fan of baking competitions on TV yourself, Vicki?
I am, but only pardon me, I think it's the good ones, by which I mean the nice ones. I watched a couple of episodes of MasterChef, and I didn't like it. I found them antagonistic. I love the Great British Baking Show. There's a Canadian version called the Great Canadian Baking Show. Absolutely love those. So that, in fact, there's even a reference to my book, where the judges and the director are arguing about why did you insult that waitress on camera? And Lily even says something about, shouldn't name it, but she says, there's that British baking show that's so popular where everybody's nice to each other. Why can't we be like that?
We've talked a little bit about the hook, what some people call the hook for your series, other people would call the frame. Can you let us know a little bit more about why you chose that particular subject for your mysteries and what kind of research you do? You've touched upon it a little bit. We'll start with you, Vicki, for tea rooms, but do you visit tea rooms? Do you look at cookbooks? Do you have people you consult with? How do you go about getting the background to your series?
As I said, my daughter...
Dear.
We're getting some intermittent static with Vicki.
We go once a year to Niagara on the lake. There's a really nice afternoon tea room at the Prince of Wales Hotel. And I'm getting messages that my internet's not too stable, so I am going to try and plow on. I hope it's okay.
Yeah.
I read Tea Time magazine in particular. It's a lovely little magazine that, full of tea, lots of recipes. We really like scones in my family. I bake a lot. I'm actually good. I shouldn't even say I bake a lot, because I don't bake nearly as much as I'd like to, because I live alone. So I would weigh 500 pounds if I did all the baking I wanted to. But when I have company, yeah, scones are my favorite thing to bake. I can whip those up, and tea time cookies and stuff like that. And I have tested out a few things for the books, wanting the kind of things you serve in a tea room, which are more little pastries than a big slab of cake. So I've tested out quite a few things, and some of those recipes are in the book. And there's a little bit of non-baking cooking, shall we say, in the book, because the character also does the B&B breakfast.
Yeah.
So I have breakfast casserole. I think in the new book I have the book that's coming out next year, I have a recipe for gluten-free pancakes, which I had to find because I don't eat gluten-free, but I searched for something. And I did try it and they were quite good.
Mm-hmm.
So much eating. When people always ask, how much research do you do? I eat a lot. That's my form of research.
Kate, you kind of explored bookbinding before you started the series. Is that true?
Yes, I never worked as a bookbinder, but I used to take classes at the San Francisco Center for the Book, which was another way to get up and see my family. They all live up there, or some of them have gone other places and come back down here. But and when I was very young, 7 or 8 years old, we lived next door to a park, and the park had activities, and one of them was making books. It wasn't quite the same thing. It was like little cardboard covers and notepad paper and punch holes and get a ribbon and you've made a book. And that was the only part I was interested in. Other little kids would be writing their stories in there, and I was like, hey, I'm finished with the book. So it was all about building the book, and that always appealed to me. So yes, I started taking classes, and when I tried to come up with my hook, I thought of all the things I love in my life and what I would be happy writing about, and that just popped right up to the surface. And I had a very good friend who was a master bookbinder, and he was very helpful, and so it went from there.
Both of your series are marketed as cozy mysteries. What do you think are the necessary ingredients for a good cozy? And we'll start with you, Kate.
I didn't know that I was writing a cozy when I wrote the book. I didn't know until I saw my cover for the first time, which was a beautiful library with a cat and a big knife stuck inside a book. And I was like, what is this? First of all, I thought, did I have a cat in the book? And I realized, of course I did. It was the neighbor's cat. But so you have to have a cat, first of all. Not really necessary, but it's nice to have a cat or a dog or both.
A dog?
Yes. I have a cat in the bookbinders, and then the fixer-uppers have a cat and a dog, and gotta have an animal because they're cozy anyway. They make you want to cuddle up. There's no graphic killings and blood and things on the page. There's not a lot of overt sexual stuff happening. There's tension often, and there's often a romance. In mine, I have to have a romance because I actually wrote romances for a while. It's a small town setting usually, or if it's not a small town, it's a small community of people that are supportive characters around the protagonist, and I'm leaving out lots of different aspects. Maybe Vicki can fill in some of them.
Yeah, I agree. I'd take it a little bit further because when when I started writing, my first books were, in fact, as I said, published by Poison Pen Press. I wrote a couple of standalone psychological suspense, and I wrote an 8-part police procedural series. So when I started writing a cozy, I consciously knew that I was writing cozy because I was asked by Penguin Random House to write a cozy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they asked my agent who.
Frozen.
It goes beyond the fact there's no overt sex and violence. You can have a really, really dark suspense novel with no sex and violence. To me, the essence of a cozy is there's no real tragedy in the characters' lives, and quite a lot of cozies, the main character might be widowed or something like that, or her parents have died. So there is maybe some background, but in the context of the book itself, there's never really any tragedy. The dead person is usually, not always, someone that either nobody knew or nobody liked very much. And the characters come together because so the essence also of cozy is characters live in a very, very pleasant place. And life there is generally very good, little ups and downs, and that was generally very good. Something has happened that's disrupted the peace of the community, so the characters come together to restore the peace and harmony of the community, and at the end the peace and the harmony is restored and it's a pleasant place again, as opposed to, for example, a noir, which is about bad people living in a bad place, and even when the resolution to the problem is solved, it's still a bad place in which they live, if you sort of see what I mean. So that's my definition of cozy.
Right. The other aspect is the hook, of course, and in cozy, the hook can be almost anything. I mean, well, a tea shop, book binding,
Gardening.
library lovers, jam shop. There's hundreds of ideas, but the hook is integral to the part of the story. You essentially weave the hook, like the book binding. People get very annoyed if I don't have enough book binding scenes. That's what draws the reader to the story, and then they get hooked on the characters and the story and everything. But the hook for a cozy is probably, I mean, besides all the other things we've mentioned, is probably one of the most important aspects of the cozies.
Yeah, you couldn't really have a cozy with a systems analyst at a bank, for example, because nobody wants to read about her coding. Yeah, I think that's a really key point. A lot of, maybe it's different than an amateur sleuth might be a systems analyst at a bank. And she might happen upon, a dead colleague or something like that. But the actual work that she does, or he, of course, during the day isn't integral to the setup of the book and the way this goes.
Yeah.
Do both of you find that you have as many readers that come to your series for the hook as for the mystery?
In a lot of, it's hard to tell, of course, but like today, for example, I just on Facebook, I have an article running right now in Crime Reads, the online magazine, about the social origins of the tea room, which is actually pretty interesting sometimes when you sort of start looking into this historical stuff. And I posted that on a afternoon tea group on Facebook, and now they're all chatting about it. And they've started into an argument about whether or not it's actually true that the Duchess of Bedford invented afternoon tea, because apparently, who knew that that's a controversy, whether or not the Duchess of Bedford, invented afternoon tea. So I'm certainly hoping that some of those tea lovers will have read that article and thought, well, this is a book I want to read.
Kate, do you get a lot of book people that come to your series that aren't mystery readers?
Yes, I do. But after a while, my readers are usually there for the mystery, but at least sometimes I think they are, but I do get a lot of comments when, as I said, when I don't put enough bookbinding in there. My other series, the Fixer Upper Mysteries, I don't know if they come for the Fixer Upper aspect to see my great carpentry skills. But it's still it's an appeal. What appeals about that series is a woman in a man's world. She's a building contractor, so that's kind of a draw. And her skills at carpentry and all of that actually contribute to solving the crime. So.
I also write the Lighthouse Library series under the pen name of Eva Gates, and I do get a lot of letters from librarians, particularly retired librarians who've come to the book. Librarians obviously are book lovers anyway, or they probably shouldn't be in that business. And and they like to read books that are written favorably about their profession, as most people do. So I get a lot of librarian readers into like the Lighthouse Library series.
I guess we could say come for the hook, stay for the murder in both.
Yes.
I'm writing that down. Wait.
Both of you have done a number of different series, and from an author's perspective, what are the advantages to writing a mystery series? What are the challenges? I can think of some that I'll add later, but let's start with you, Vicki.
Of writing a series, I mean, as opposed to a standalone?
Yeah.
Because I have written standalones. They both have advantages and disadvantages. The main advantage of a standalone, I feel, is that you can take the character and have one pivotal moment in their life. They're dealing with often with some past trauma, something that has to be dealt with before they continue on with their lives. And the story begins and the story ends, and the character has either, succeeded or failed at dealing with this one pivotal thing that happened in their life, or the characters, if there's multiple characters. Whereas a series, you kind of draw that sort of stuff out. They have conflict with their parents, nothing, or their job or something. So even though in a series the mystery is resolved, and it usually is in almost all mystery novels, the mystery series, the mystery itself is resolved within the one book. The conflicts that they might have with other people in their lives, their parents with their worst enemy or something like that, carries on from series, from book to book. So I like the standalone for the way of being able to wrap that kind of stuff up. But at the same time, the advantage of the series is it provides a lot of things in life don't ever have a resolution, right? So you can kind of draw them out a lot more, or you can take a lot longer time. I have a character in the Lighthouse Library series that my character really clashed with in the first several books. And gradually over a progression of the series, they're getting on a lot better. I do get writers who write and say they like the way they like that relationship has changed. So that I think is the real advantage of a series, actually, that you can slowly have people change and grow.
Mm-hmm. Another advantage, I think, for myself is you're not reinventing a world every time you start a new book. You do have to reintroduce characters and talk about a little bit of background for a lot of the regulars, but you're not doing that heavy duty world building that you do when you first start a series or a standalone. That's a big advantage for me. Of course, you do, like I said, you do have to reintroduce ideas and, characters and past fights and all sorts of things like that.
Yeah. And one of the problems,
go ahead.
One of the problems with the series, of course, particularly, Kate's on book 16. How many times can you have this character, running through the woods at night, pursued by a guy, with a knife or something like that, right? So one of the problems I'm finding with the series that I write, it's not even the plot itself or the reason for the murder or how the murder's come into all that. It's that particularly the climax, how the character manages to defeat the bad guy at the climax, usually by herself. I don't want the boyfriend or the husband stepping in to fight her battles for. So I am starting to run out of ideas for how she can get away, should I say.
Yeah, I've run out of ideas of ways to kill people, except that this book has a really cool way to kill someone. And I was so happy I came up. It's actually the background is true, and I don't want to give it away, but the first death is fun and interesting, and it was historically accurate to some extent.
But just for any law enforcement officials listening, and it's all fictional on Kate's part.
Yes, that's right.
It's all fictional. Yeah.
I would think, just from my perspective, working in bookstores and libraries, that one of the challenges for you writing the series is if you're up to book 16, can you make each of those books stand alone? Because you will get readers that will say, I'm not going to pick up Paper Caper because I have to read 15 books before I can catch up with this. So how do you try to ensure that each of the books in the series is an experience on its own? Kate, we'll start with you.
Well, yes, of course, I do. Another aspect of having a series is that you have lots of characters to choose from to sort of build the story around. And so it's always, I think, for me, I think the books are always pretty different. I mean, they center on a different person. That, you know, I have one that was an old American Revolutionary era cookbook, or I mean, they kind of go all over the place, and I like to think that I I have lots of different new ideas, and it's not the same thing. And I know Vicky's is that way too because I've read her books. So I think you should read every one of my books. I'm just saying.
One of my daughters used to be a big fantasy reader. She would read these, you know, multiple part series, and she finally gave up. She actually never finish it or lose her contract or something because they didn't wrap up, right? Each book kind of flowed into the other book like multiple volumes, and she actually kind of gave up reading fantasy books like that because she didn't want to get invested in a really long story that never ended. Game of Thrones being the pretty good example. But I think that mostly in the crime writing field, each book, the mystery is completely self-contained within each book. One of the things is, for example, you read a series book, if there's a character in book 5 who's working happily at the library or is the waitress in the tea room, and if you go back and read book 1 and this character is a suspect, well, you know for sure she didn't do it because she's still working in the tea room. So there's a little bit of that, but I don't think that should spoil your enjoyment of book 1. That's only one person that you know didn't do it, right? That there's still the whole plot line and all the other characters.
Yeah, that's actually a difficult aspect of the ongoing series is those people that are suspicious in book 4 or 5, and you want to bring them back because they're an ongoing character, and I don't know, it's difficult. I have brought them back, but I still question it and worry about it.
Yeah.
So I guess it's probably fair to say that you could enjoy each of your new books on its own, but you will enhance your reading experience if you read all of them.
And the same for the, certainly for the romance. Not all, most cozies have some kind of a romantic angle to it. So in a series book, in Kate's book now, she just mentioned her husband, Derek. Well, he wasn't her husband at the beginning of the series, right?
Yeah.
It was kind of a will they, won't they kind of thing. Well, so if you read the new book first, the kind of the romance or the new Est book first, some of that will they, won't they romance stuff is gone, but that's not the focus of the book. Maybe the reader would even enjoy seeing how they got together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like to read series books. In fact, I love to read series books, and not just cozies, but lots of other styles of writing because of that ongoing, the building of the characters and the relationships, and they're comfortable. They're a comfort read, even in serial killer Amish country there, which is one of my favorite series, but you come back for those characters, so it's very comforting.
Let's talk a little bit about both of your writing processes when it comes to mysteries. Not being a writer, I would think, because you have to plant clues and red herrings and you have to know motives and all that for many writers, mystery writers, you need to know some things in advance. But I know there are some writers who just sit down and wherever it takes them, that's where they go. What kind of approach do you have when it comes to writing your mysteries? And we'll start with you, Vicki.
When I first started, actually, most of the books I wrote for Poison Pen, I did kind of write by the seat of my pants. I started the book off and saw how it goes. And that was even with the police procedurals, which are the same sort of, puzzle type mystery as the cozy. And then when I got contracts, particularly starting with Penguin Random House, they wanted to see an outline before they'd give you the contract. So I sort of settled down to write an outline, and I found that I like that far better. I find writing an outline really, really, well, it certainly gets me at least over all that doubt and the writer's block stuff and all that. So now, even if I'm not required to produce an outline for the publisher, I do one for myself. But it's still kind of maybe it's almost a half and half. So I sort of start the book. I have the idea that I could tell you in 5 words. And I sit down and I start. And I'll write quite a bit, maybe as much as a quarter of the book, maybe even up until the murder happens, off the seat of my pants, just seeing where it goes. And then I stop. And then I write the outline from there. So the scenes of who the characters are and their motives and all that have been sort of planted, and I put it all into some kind of an order in the outline. And then I follow my outline fairly closely. I might diverge if I have a better idea, but the purpose of the outline is so that I don't have to think too much about what I'm doing from that point on, so I don't diverge a whole lot.
Yeah. I plot and I outline, and I work with my plot group, and we get together, and I come away with a 10 or 15 page outline of the story, and then I start writing the book, and I'm just lost in the story. It's I know where I have to go, but they're big giant steps. They're, for every scene you have to build a scene, and characters have to speak, and things have to happen, and my outline doesn't give me any of that, which I don't know what happened there. They just don't, there's not enough information in an outline to fill up a whole book. So I always feel like a pantser once I start writing the book, but I do have a guideline for the outline. So I do know that what's going to happen next, but it's not going to happen next. It's going to happen maybe in 3 chapters from now. So I'm kind of half and half, and that works for me.
Yeah. I'm kind of the same. To me, the hardest part of writing it, once I'm writing the book, is getting into this. The outline might say, Lily goes to talk to Mary to ask Mary what she knows about Fred's background. Well, how do I get Mary in the door or get Lily in the door? I mean, I don't know that. And I sometimes, fingers poised over the keyboard. She got in the car, she drove down the street. You don't really want to do that, but then, you don't want to jump into it too. So I find that transitioning between scenes really hard sometimes. Yeah.
Those are very hard. I have a hard time starting the book. I know I might know the whole story, but if I can't get the first sentence down, I'm kind of lost. I don't skip around, so I just, once I start, I can go forward, but starting is a little tricky sometimes.
For those tuning in that might be new to the world of cozy mysteries, besides both of your books, if you had to suggest what you would consider to be a quintessential cozy mystery writer or writers, what names would you give to these people? And we'll start with you, Vicki.
Certainly for me, the quintessential, meaning at least from my personal experience, the very, very first cozy writer I read was Dianne Mcdavidson. And that's 1980s probably. Certainly, she was the first one I'd ever even heard of who was writing kind of what we know as a cozy. They even had recipes in the book. She was a caterer, so that's really interesting. She's a caterer, and she has recipes in the book, and that's really interesting. So certainly to me, she was groundbreaking. I know there were cozy writers writing before her, but that she was quintessential to me, and that she introduced me to an entire new world. Now, I would say today, the quintessential cozy writer writing today are Kate Carlisle and Jen Winley, who, to me anyway, just sort of typify what is being written and what's popular in cozy writing today, and in terms of character and background and humor and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, so I'll say that even if Kate wasn't here, I'd still say that. And Jen
Thank you.
McKinley as well, I think, are the cozy writers who are writing today. And is Dianne Mcdavidson still writing? I don't think I've seen her name in a
No,
long
I
time.
think it's
So,
been a number of years, though. As I said to Vicki earlier, I think Hallmark Channel just recently adapted one of her books for a movie. So
oh,
there may be some new interest in her
Yeah.
backlist. What
good.
about you, Kate?
Um, well, I like Vicki Delany.
Not
I
quintessential.
I read your library, your Lighthouse library series, because I like books about books. So I've read all
Which
of
I
those,
just
and those
happen
are
to
good.
have the newest one right here.
Well, look at that. And I like Jen's books. They're very charming, and I like the town and everything about them. I like. There's so many. I love Cleo Coyle, and she doesn't write a cozy really because there's so much else going on. It's really about New York, and it's about um,
You're talking about her coffee shop?
yeah, the coffee shop series.
Well, they follow the conventions of the
Yes,
mystery.
yeah, they do. I and I God, where am I? I love my Ellie Alexander.
Yeah.
I like hers, and I used to visit Ashland every year for the Shakespeare Festival, so I just grabbed onto those. I thought they were great, and she is someone who takes a hook and just goes to town. I mean, there could be dead bodies everywhere, and that character would go and make a pie or something. And I don't say that in a bad way. It's so fun to read her books, so that's not a criticism. I really enjoy her books. Um, God, there's so many.
There are a lot. I love
Well,
good
that's a
ones.
good start.
Yeah.
Um, we do have some questions from your many fans tuning in, so I want to pause and take a few of those before we run out of time. The first question is, how do you manage to keep coming up with original ideas for murders with so many books?
Good question. Um, with my books, as I said, I always start with a book. So as soon as I have the book that I'm going to talk about, and the book that Brooklyn is going to work on, and the book that is the center of the story, I get the suspects from the book, and I get the murder from that book, and everything kind of revolves around that book that I've chosen for that particular book. So I always come up with new ways to kill. No, I don't. But once in a while I do. I always come up with a new story because it's all about the book I'm writing about, and there's parallels between the book I'm writing and the book that I'm writing about. So, I mean, I've written 16. Let's see, Oliver Twist. They had a twist festival. It's called Twisted at the Book Art Center in San Francisco. So the character is the head of the center, and she's a crazy, very domineering woman, and she's dead at the end of the. So there's always new people, is what I'm saying, I guess. Even though I have my usual cast of characters, there's always new people coming in based on the book that I'm writing about.
You always, the books that you select for the bibliophile series to anchor the story, do you always have a strong personal connection to them? Are they like favorite books, or you
Mostly they are favorite books. I mean, I've had Rebecca and
I'm thinking of Rebecca.
um, Oliver Twist and, gosh, Faust was in the first book, and um, you sell your soul to the devil. That brings up some
Yep.
interesting, mysterious ideas. But yes, I usually have a connection to the books. I've written two books that were um, made up, and one was the cookbook uh, conspiracy with the American Revolutionary War uh, cookbook, which was also a diary and a home remedy book. And I actually had a connection to that too, because if you've ever read the old um, cookbooks that have these odd home remedies where you take 7 moles and you know, turn them to powder and you sprinkle it all. I mean, it's just hilariously funny. So I had a great connection to that. But yes, I always have a connection. I like to write about the books that I like to read. So.
Vicki, how do you come up with new and different ways to kill people in your books?
So like I sort of alluded to earlier, sometimes it's actually a little bit of a struggle. One of the things in particular I find that, for example, I can't do is knife someone, because if you knife someone, there's a heck of a lot of blood is going to get on the killer. So they're going to be seen fleeing the scene. I mean, they can't slip back into the party and pretend nothing had happened. So there's a certain element in writing a cozy mystery where you're, well, prevented from writing something that's too terribly gory or that kind of stuff. But poisons, I've used a fair amount of poisons, and I have a lot of fun looking at poisons. And it's pretty interesting to realize, if anybody's ever been to any of the mystery conferences where there's the woman who calls herself the Poison Lady, Lucy, I forget her last name, begins with a Z, calls herself the Poison Lady, and she talks at great length about the poisons that anybody has access to. So that's interesting stuff to know. Strangling is also another easy one. You can strangle someone with their tie and then slip out and go back to the party and that kind of stuff. So that the murder kind of has to fit the plot, right? In that, as I said, the person is the person is, because in a cozy mystery, it's never a mob enforcer. It's not a Russian terrorist, or it's not something like that. Someone who's part of the community. So if there's a party going on, that person is either at the party or has a way of sneaking in, or that kind of stuff. So I don't know. Maybe it says something about what we're like as people, but examining ways of killing people is interesting. I did have somebody, I don't have anybody die, but I did have the character threatened when the brakes on her car were tampered with. So I had to look into how, I didn't even know if that was possible. It happens in movies all the time, right? So I didn't even know it was possible. So I looked into it, yeah, it's actually possible. But it's not a very good way of killing someone, because the brakes will usually fail before they get very far, but it worked in my context. So, so I have an interesting and sordid search history on my computer.
I think you may have answered this, but I'll just introduce the question again from one of your viewers. When you came up with the idea for your different series, was it something that you thought about and presented to the publisher? Or was it something, and I know this happens with some authors, where a publisher comes to writers and says, we need a series about dairy farms, we want you to write it. So how did it work in your case?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, my Lighthouse Library series was a work for hire, which is what you're calling the dairy farmer series, that Penguin Random House. That's why I switched from writing police procedurals and standalones. So the Lighthouse Library series, and that's why I write them under a pen name, because a work for hire, the publisher actually owns the copyright. The author does not own the copyright. So that means the author doesn't even own the author name. Now, in my case, when the series was dropped by Penguin, I was given the copyright. So I took it to another publisher, and I now continue with it. And we discussed whether I'd start writing it under my name, Vicki Delany, but we thought that'd be too confusing. My other series have come up pretty much with me. With the Tea by the Sea series, Penguin actually approached Majan and I had said they'd like to have me write a series for them. Did I have a good idea? So we threw back and forth a whole lot of ideas, and I had a really good one. I thought it was going to be a person who led winery tours on bicycles. Because I live in a big wine tourist area, right? You know, they go around on their bikes to the wineries and the farms and all that. They shot that one down, and we threw a few things around, and then that was my idea. I thought, oh geez, I enjoy afternoon tea. Maybe I can do something with that. So in my case, it's been a mixture of all of those things.
Yeah. The bibliophiles I created and started and took to the publisher. The fixer-upper mysteries are slightly different. I came up with the idea, but at the same time, my agent mentioned that this was in the heyday of cozies, about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe, when there were so many. There's still a lot, but back in the day, they were really, really looking for new cozy ideas. And the publishers were coming up with their own and doing the, writer for hire ideas. I heard that there was a call going out for a handy woman. And I thought, well, that's not my girl because she's a building contractor. So I quickly called my agent and said, I've got a building contractor. Put a stop to that handy woman idea. There's probably a handy woman idea, and actually there are several series that include a handy woman. I know Sarah Graves wrote one for a while. She was remodeling her home and fixing it up, and that was a good one. But this was a building contractor who worked with Victorian homes in a small town like Ferndale, California. That's all Victorian buildings, and so that's kind of where I went.
We have a question for Kate, and I think you can also expand on this based on your own personal experience, but they say they love the commune setting for the book and the characters there. Is this commune based on a real place? Dharma, I think, is the name.
Yes, Dharma is the name of the town. And it is sort of, yes, a little bit. I was much younger. In my younger days, I was a part of a commune. I didn't live at the commune. I visited the commune, but and there was a sort of a guru that was very spiritual, and it was an interesting experience with an old boyfriend. So, but yes, it was, and it was in Northern California. It was, and they had a winery. So there you have it. True story.
Our next question, I think, is for Kate, and I think you may have answered it, but you can reinforce that. Will there be more Lighthouse mysteries?
Oh, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, not for Kate. That's for Vicki.
Oh, that's for Vicki. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm actually really happy to be able to say that Death by Beach Read, which just came out a couple of months ago, is the 9th. The 10th book is written and finished, and it's called Death Knells and Wedding Bells, because guess what? It takes place at a wedding, and that will be out spring. And I have just, in the last 2 weeks, signed a contract for 3 more Lighthouse Library series.
Yay.
For 3 more Lighthouse Library books. So there's guaranteed to be at least 4 more coming.
And you do have 2 other series that you're working on, is that correct?
I also write look what I happen to have here, Sherlock Holmes Bookshop series about a character who owns a Sherlock Holmes themed bookstore. And I have also have a little bit of news too, that the year-round Christmas mysteries will be back. They were discontinued by Penguin after book 5, which is this one here. And I have just signed a contract with Crooked Lane for 2 more in the year-round Christmas series. So they're coming back.
Great.
And
Good.
Kate, you've mentioned that we can look forward to another fixer-upper.
Well, one comes out next year in
April.
April. I think they might move it to May, but it's called Dress to Drill. And then there will be two more after that,
I
at
love your
least.
titles.
Two more coming after that, maybe more, but two more for sure. And same with the, wait,
Oh, good.
after the paper caper number 16, there's going to be two more after that. And one of them is a Christmas book.
Oh,
Always popular.
Yes, that's
I'm
exciting.
guessing the book in connection with that will have to be thematically related.
Of course.
You bring up an interesting point that we just have a few minutes to kind of delve into. Normally, for authors, you have a schedule, you turn in books, and it's usually in the fall or the spring. But this whole last 2 years with the pandemic and with
Yeah.
paper shortages and printers closing down, people who normally look for your Fixer Upper series in the fall or the winter, Kate, now that's got shifted, that's because of these other factors. Is that correct?
Right. Well, the paper shortage and all of those supply chain issues was part of it, but then we decided to do a Christmas book for each series.
Oh,
So we've rearranged all the schedules to make room for that because um, the Fixer Upper comes out in May now, and the next bibliophile will come out at Christmas. They usually come out at the end of October or mid-October.
mhm.
So schedules all had to go, crazy, but the schedules were all going crazy anyway, so we kind of were okay with that. Hopefully they'll find me.
That's
With
right.
4 different series, Vicki, did the pandemic publishing issues impact your writing schedule?
It didn't vary my writing. I did at first. I would have thought that I'd have more, time. I mean, I live alone in a small place in the country anyway. But at the beginning of the pandemic, I guess like everybody, just distracted all the time, right? It was, and as somebody explained it, writing is a large part of your writing's done in the subconscious. When your subconscious is constantly wondering what's happening now. I found it sort of the same last year around the time of the US election, just constantly like, what's next? What's happening now? Yeah, so it took me longer to write. The book that I was writing the beginning of 2020 took me quite a bit longer, maybe even twice as long as it would normally have taken me. I think just because my mind wasn't in a good place. But then, life gets back to normal and we sort of all settled in and everything sort of carried on. I wasn't, I didn't miss any deadlines or it wasn't late or anything. But it was an interesting time to be sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's normal yet.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually doing 2 bookstore signings this weekend at,
Really?
near Toronto. It'll be
Okay.
my first time out the door in obviously I've got out. First time in a bookstore in 2.5 years. So
Yeah.
we'll see if anybody dares to come.
I think we've got time for one last question before we have to wrap up. And the question is, this particular person tuning in has noticed more series are starting to feature older protagonists, and they find that very commendable. Do you see that as a trend? Do you think it's something that you would include in a new series?
I love the Thursday Murder Club mysteries. That's one of the ones that's really,
Yeah, right.
hugely popular right now. And I really love them with the older. And I actually had an idea based on that. From the Sherlock Holmes Bookshop series, I said to my agent, how about a spin-off series featuring great Uncle Arthur and Mrs. Ramspat, the neighbor? And she said no. Oh, she didn't
Okay.
even ask, she said no.
Wow.
So I don't think that's the direction I'm going in anytime soon. So I don't know about anybody else.
Yeah, I hope that's true. I mean, it's Miss Marple. I mean, why wouldn't that be a popular idea? But I think it's a great idea, and I hope there are more, and all kinds of other. There's a lot of Not a
The
lot.
cozy world is becoming more diverse.
There's some diversity coming into the cozy world, and that's a good thing. Very good thing. Yeah.
And for those that like, we'll call them senior sleuths.
Yeah.
Deanna Rayburn has a new book coming called, and now I forgot the title. Great, it was on the tip of my mind. But she's taking it apart from her Speedwell series, and it's featuring 4 women of a more mature age, and that's coming in September. And I apologize, the title was right in my brain, but it's gone away. But look up Deanna Rayburn, and you'll see that. I think it's called Killers of a Certain Age or something. I could be wrong, but I definitely know the author. And if you like those more mature sleuths, that's one to put on your to-read list. We're just about out of time, but can you, each of you, tell us how readers can learn more about you and your books? Are you on social media? Do you have websites? Kate, you start.
I'm at katecarlisle.com, and it's got all kinds of information about me and a secret room that has recipes and puzzles and all that kind of stuff. And I'm also on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm not on TikTok. And I keep thinking I should go on TikTok, but I'm clueless. I like looking at them. What? And Facebook, sorry, of course. Yeah.
You've got a big Facebook page.
All the time, yes.
And I'm much the same. I'm also not going on TikTok because I gather that's kind of video friendly and pictures are enough for me. Yeah, I'm at vickidelany.com. Just check the spelling of my name. It's often misspelled Vickidelany. On Facebook, I'm at Eva Gates Author. I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram as either Vicki Delany or Vicki.Delany. So I'm pretty easy to find. And my webpage, vickidelany.com, has links to all those places if you forget what they're called.
Well, I can't believe 60 minutes have flown by so fast. It's just been an absolute delight having author Vicki Delany and Kate Carlisle with us. Their new books are The Paper Caper and Murder Spills the Tea. Please do feel free to order a copy from the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'd love to thank Vicki and Kate for taking some time to visit us virtually, and thank those tuning in to another author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore. We hope to see you even virtually next time.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Fun.
Thanks everybody for joining us.
Good to see you, and we'll see you soon, maybe in person.
I certainly hope so. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello. We hope you're enjoying our programs and podcasts with authors. We'd like to expand them, and your help would be appreciated. Please make a donation at poisonedpenfoundation.org. 100% of the proceeds will go to help connect authors with readers in this difficult time. Thank you.